So Danny is actually not the thief in this movie that Proverbs is talking about. It's Benedict. He stole Danny's wife, and now he must pay the price for it.
I'm reminded of another leader who had a crew of about a dozen men who beat extreme circumstances to bankrupt an evil empire and free his bride.
You are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to episode 371 of Popcorn Theology, where we examine films for where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption.
Been practicing that speech, haven't you?
A little bit, yeah. Did I rush it? I felt like I rushed it.
No, it was good. I liked it.
Okay, good. I'm David.
I'm Eric.
Good stuff. And so we are, before we get going, I want to remind everyone, hey, welcome. Like, share, subscribe, do all of that good stuff. Yeah. If you haven't already, please do. That's always good stuff. You can be part of our crew that way. So why are we covering Ocean's 11? Obviously you clicked, you know what we're covering. And it's because we're kind of doing an impromptu theme month. In the wake of Nosferatu, we're trying to stick with movies that are remakes. It's easy today to think of remakes only as kind of subpar, unnecessary things, which arguably a lot of them are. But it's easy to forget that some of our favorite classic movies are also remakes. And so, there's quite a few of those, right? Right, Eric? Any particular ones come to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got, obviously, You've Got Mail, Cheaper by the Dozen, Little Shop of Horrors, The Thing, The Fly, True Grit, which a lot of people probably know that one a little bit more. This is one I did not know is The Departed. Did not know that The Departed was a remake. A Star is Born. One of my favorite is 310 to Yuma.
That was a good one.
Look up Popcorn Theology's episode on 310 to Yuma. Fantastic.
Were you on that
episode.
One?
I was not, but I believe I was the one. I'm going to claim that I was the one that nominated it.
You pushed it. Yeah, great.
I had a good streak for a while of being the one that nominated things. Mission Impossible. That was a remake from a television show, so it was almost like a reboot type of thing. And then Fistful of Dollars. I did not know that was a remake as well.
I found out about that today. Yeah, apparently it was based on a Kurosawa film.
Oh,
it's one of those like
sense.
Inspired by this, inspired by that, inspired by that.
Yeah.
And so lots of great movies. And so we're kind of doing a bit of a remake month, kind of a new year, new movie, new you or whatever type of thing. And so last week we released The Thing, and then this coming week we have a Patreon pick. And so I'm not sure if we can announce that yet. Maybe some of the nominees.
Yeah, not yet. As we're recording, the poll is going on. So is either going to be The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, Freaky Friday, Little Women, the 2019 version, or True Grit. And right now, True Grit and The Secret Life of Walter Mitty are head to head. So by the time you're listening to this, you'll know which one has won. But as of this second, we've still got 48 hours of polling left. So
I was going to say I wouldn't hate Freaky Friday. That would be kind of fun.
Well, I could switch my vote, man.
There we go.
I just have to convince my wife. Yeah,
I do have a vote. So I guess I can do that. And not as a host. I actually started supporting us like a couple months ago.
Awesome.
I finally thought it was worth my money. So anyway, but yeah, I guess you could say there's just nothing new under the sun. There's a lot of remakes. I forgot a lot of those were remakes.
Well, Hollywood's been out of ideas for years. I think I did point this out when we talked about Harvey a year ago, probably longer, is that they remade Harvey years later with Jimmy Stewart. So it's like, and they actually remade it like 3 times. It's just kind of like a crazy thing all said and done. So it's like, What are we doing, people? What are we doing? Always out of ideas.
Yeah, we're just recycling them, making them new, making them fresh, making them different. And a lot of times the follow-up ones are the ones that people, well, not a lot of the time, but sometimes the follow-up ones are beloved more than the originals. And so with that in mind, we're going to get into today's mark, if you will, which is Ocean's 11, directed by Steven Soderbergh, I think. And it stars George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Julia Roberts, Andy Garcia, Matt Damon, Bernie Mac, Casey Affleck, Scott Conn, Eddie Jameson, Xiaobo Jean, I think.
Jean, yep.
Jean, okay. Don Cheadle, Carl Reiner, and the incomparable Elliot Gould, one of my favorite comic actors. It felt right to list all of them, right? A lot of them don't get listed. And also, who I think is the 12th member of the crew, the music. So the score or soundtrack was by David Holmes, and I love the music from this movie. So anyway, that's everyone that's in it. If you don't know, we're not doing the other one. This one.
And for those that don't know what the plot is for this 24-year-old movie,
right,
is a thief and con artist Danny Ocean rounds up a gang of associates to stage an elaborate heist to rob 3 Las Vegas casinos at the same time.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're going to do real quick before we jump into spoiler territory, again, for a 24-year-old heist movie. Not the kind of movie you can really spoil a whole lot, but, we have our formats. And so we're going to rate this movie. We have our popcorn and our theology ratings. So we don't really refer to them as bad, good, or great. Instead, we say the film is either stale, fresh, or buttered and salted. And we're going to try and stick with a 1-sentence summary for each. So, Eric, what are you thinking in terms of the ratings on the popcorn side for this movie?
All right, so I'm not going to do 1 sentence. I'm going to do 30 seconds.
I thought it was, though. It's okay.
I thought it was fresh. I love a good heist film. A good heist film. It's a ton of fun, and it keeps you engaged throughout it. Every character is given something to do. It does seem like there were too many characters, and some of the characters could have been combined to do similar roles. But every character is fun and was entertaining to watch. So definitely fresh.
That's fair. Yeah. Elliot Gould is he's just the money. There's a couple of them that they're not exactly super active. Fair enough. But yeah, I'm going to say buttered and salted. I love this movie. I love, we'll talk later about the rest of the franchise, but I think it's a fantastic heist film with an all-star ensemble cast that I will disagree. I think it doesn't feel particularly crowded. I think they balance the number of people well, even if logistically the heist could have been done with Ocean's 9 or Ocean's 7. But still, skillful use of humor, and I think a fantastic score that really helps carry the film. So, so both positive, but it's a little tiny bit of disagreement. I wonder if we'll be on the same side on the theology ratings. And so for this rating system, we're looking at the depth of themes. How much is there that this movie prompts discussion about? Is it diluted, meaning 1 or 2? Carbonated, meaning a fair bit to talk about? Or my cup runneth over, where it's just bursting at the seams with depth of themes? And so, Eric, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so I'm diluted. Like most comedies, it's pretty shallow. But it's kind of cool. It's like most comedies, you can usually get some good themes out of them, but as far as abundance of themes or even how deeply they delve into them, not that much. So this is pretty diluted and fairly shallow.
Yeah, I will agree with that. Even when we were planning to do it, I was kind of replaying the movie in my mind, being like, there's a lot of here's what's happening.
Yeah.
It's as great as the popcorn is. There's just not a ton of substance. There's not a lot under the surface. But still, it's a fun movie, and we're minors, if you will. We're digging, and so we're getting pretty good at that.
They're like 12, not minors.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think we're going to find some good stuff to talk about in this one. And who doesn't love this movie? I mean, it was good enough to spawn a franchise, which we'll talk more about after the break. But before we get to the movie, we want to encourage you to like and share this episode with your friends if you like what you hear. Unlike Ocean's Crew, we're not keeping things on the low profile. We want to broaden the conversation.
Yeah, and keep you tapped into our feed. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and follow us on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, and Discord.
That's right. So one quick way that you can help support the podcast is just rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Those ratings help boost us in the algorithm and ensure that there's always someone watching. And as a quick aside, I forgot to mention, that if you do review us, we were doing a little bit of a giveaway now. So it's far from the $14 million, but we're giving out some free stuff. We've got some stickers here. So all you have to do is rate us on iTunes, because that's where most people will find us. And so just write a 5-star rating, write a quick review, send that along with your mailing address to feedback@popcorntheology.com. You can check the show notes for these details as well as a link. And I'll send you 2 free Popcorn Theology stickers, or maybe some more, because I got a big stack of these. They've got a QR code. One's for you, one's for a friend. And just a little thank you for, helping get the word out for more people. Or if you like, you can help supply our bankroll by supporting us financially through Patreon.
Yes, donating a few dollars a month will make you a member of our crew. Patron saint. That gives you special access to a whole host of exclusive benefits, including the Facebook group, special channel in the public Discord server. You get to vote on future episodes, and for our premium seating members, you get a special weekly In the Lobby podcast episodes where you can join us live while we record select episodes.
That's right. Yeah. So it's basically like a whole second podcast that you get to follow, a second show that we're doing, and you get to follow live and vote. And so, join us. Talk
about a lot of cool topics.
That's right. And so we're going to drop the ads, and then we're going to, cut the power and dig a little deeper into Ocean's 11.
Wait, David.
Yeah.
All Reds.
All right.
Up in the sky, look! It's a bird! It's a plane!
Cinemagog, The Marvelous Era. James Harleman here, the cinema guy, announcing the sequel to my first book on film and faith. Let's face it, entertainment has changed dramatically since the first book published in 2012, and comic book characters and franchises are everywhere, so I decided to set my sights on superheroes and examine the evolution of Hollywood in this follow-up to the first Cinemagog book. For example, what does Loki tell us about culture's view of God? Why does the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Infinity Saga continually align with biblical themes? In the Marvelous Era, I review each film and show not only how the individual movies express gospel parallels, but each phase essentially reveals a multi-point sermon. I also explore DC, Star Wars, the Monsterverse, and more. Without compromising scriptural truth, we can sift these stories and discover how we might reject, receive, and redeem ideas for personal reflection and Christian conversation. Also, has Hollywood's messaging gotten worse? The book explores ways these marvelous mythologies correspond with conversion, Christian living, church history, and Reformation, but I do also highlight what has been the entertainment industry's darker, indoctrinating decade, as well as toxic fandom and the dangers of immersion in pop culture that just might drown us spiritually if we're not careful. So suit up, assemble, and join me on a journey to the Infinity Saga and beyond. Cinemagog, The Marvel Us Era. Coming soon in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle editions via Amazon.com.
10 years after a brutal war, former Navy SEAL Doyle in an armored bus prowls the broken remnants of a devastated America. Jonathan pastors a small church. When he meets Doyle, he sees an opportunity to expand his ministry. The two men strike a bargain. This journey will change them both in ways they could have never imagined, as Doyle's unbelief collides with Jonathan's faith. Eric Landfried's Solitary Man is an action-packed post-apocalyptic story with a solidly biblical worldview. This Ambassador International release and its sequel, Conflicted Man, are available today. Order directly at ericlandfried.com.
Hey, this is James, and if you're listening to Popcorn Theology, it's because you're interested in movies, or theology, or best of all, both. And that probably means you're our kind of people, sharing things in common with our community, and maybe sharing common interests our listeners and viewers would be interested in as well. So why not partner with us and advertise your business or ministry right here on Popcorn Theology? We're looking for great, like-minded sponsors and offer reasonable rates with a variety of formats to get your message out. Remember, our fans aren't mindless consumers, so they'll give you thoughtful consideration. That's big part of what we're all about. So for more information on advertising with us, contact info@popcorntheology.com.
You gotta be nuts, too. And you're gonna need a crew as nuts as you are. Who do you got in mind?
And we're back, dropping the spoiler warning as we trigger the vault and bag up the themes in Ocean's 11. But first things first, it's time for our popcorn thoughts. So Eric, you thought that it was fresh, and I'm curious why not buttered and salted, but we'll now's your chance to defend yourself.
All right, so it's a fun film. I've seen it multiple times. I will say this and The Sting are probably two almost perfect heist films. They're almost perfect heist films. The plot is fairly simple, and it makes you actually one of its marks at the end of the day by staging certain scenes, by making you think that you have all the information, but you've really only been given 50% of it. And I didn't notice any. I tried to pay attention this time. I could have missed it. I actually didn't notice really any real plot holes. Like it all seems to work. The dialogue was quick. It was quotable. It was witty.
Yeah,
it was a lot of fun. Most unrealistic part is the fountain scene at the end, because anyone who has been to Las Vegas and has seen that fountain knows it is never not like it's so ridiculously crowded. It's so ridiculously crowded.
There's no room for 10 people to sit shoulder to shoulder and look at it.
No. It's like it is crowded 24/7. It is
probably because of this movie in part, but it's beautiful as well.
Anytime it's good. The fountains are going. The other crazy thing is it goes off in sequence to like pop music, and so like in movies you've never heard, you don't know that it's actually playing music as it's going sequencing and stuff like that. Is one of the crazy mind-blowing things when you see it in person. You go, wait a second, I just assumed it was a fountain that did all these things. No, it's actually playing music and shooting in sequence and stuff. So it's kind of cool. But that's the most unrealistic part.
Well, it's funny because so in the movie that's happening while they're playing Claire de Lune by Debussy, I think is how you say it. Beautiful, beautiful piece of music. But to think what they're probably hearing when they recorded that scene was something like, "If you're gonna be my lover, you gotta."
Honestly, it was the I don't know. It was not Celine Dion. Actually, it may have Celine Dion or Cher. Do you believe in what? I forget. I don't know the words, but that played when I saw it in person. That played like 4 of the times. So it could have been that all the way back.
There's a good chance it was that. They just had to look all peaceful and happy and stuff about it.
I know, yeah.
That's funny.
But why is not buttered and salted is more of a personal way of how I've started rating a lot more stuff. Is like, I love this movie. I'll watch it again, but it's not a movie that's going to be like on my top shelf, top 20, films of all time type of thing like that. So I've started becoming a little bit more like tight with my own personal buttered and salted versus fresh and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more of an own personal thing. I would say probably about 2-3 years ago, I would be like, oh yeah, buttered and salted. I love that movie, blah, blah, blah. But I become a little bit more cynical and my tastes have changed a little bit more. So.
Fair enough. Well, no, nothing wrong with being a hard critic, right? I mean, because that's one thing we don't do a ton of here. Because in general, we're not, we're not Siskel and Ebert. We're not covering everything that comes out. We're cherry picking stuff we really want to see. And unlike Eric, I'm a bit of an easier critic. If I'm going to bother being on an episode these days, it's probably going to be one that I really like. And so, yeah, buttered and salted for me. I thought, man, how does this movie have this many people and work? It just, I don't know. It just seems to really work. It has a good cast that seems to have good chemistry. It doesn't feel crowded. Anytime I see a movie with that many famous people in it, now I get really like even Grown Ups. See the poster for Grown Ups or whatever, and I'm just like, nope, not gonna like that. Like, just because I'm like, that's too crowded. But for this one, some of them weren't a huge deal, admittedly, but still, the humor was understated. It was not outlandish. It was subtle. I loved the humor in it. The score is amazing. I listened to it a lot. It's on one of my work podcasts because it's just a good energy, and it helps you feel adventuresome about what you're doing. You kind of feel like you're pulling off a heist while you're doing something extremely dull. So pretty helpful stuff. But I do have a couple gripes, if I'm going to be honest. There were a couple of things. One, there's about 1,000 coincidences that are involved in this, right? I mean, there's so many, like, hey, how did he know that he would ask him this question in the hallway with that camera on him and not in the room?
Yeah.
Right? How did he know it would take him that long to get back to the room? There's a million little things that you couldn't possibly have accounted for. But also, when they get to the bottom of this shaft, they're still dangling 10 feet above. I'm like, you knew how big it was. Also, why does Tess go back to Danny at the end?
I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
I literally thought it's just like, okay, leave the guy who's not willing to trade you for $150 million.
Great. Get rid of him.
It was like, come on, lady. You know what your value is. No one's worth $150 million. It's like, no, but I get leaving him because you feel betrayed or whatever. But going back to Danny, I didn't get it. Like, I didn't understand, like, the conversations that he had, up to that point didn't make it seem like she had fallen back in love with him or was always in love with him, yada yada, like all of that. Is like, I agree. It didn't make any. I'm also very biased. I'm not a huge Julia Roberts fan.
No, me neither.
I've thought she is. And please debate me in the comment section, please.
Yeah, let us know why we're wrong.
I've always thought that her beauty is overrated and her acting and her movies are overrated. So. Yeah. Her and Sarah Jessica Parker, which is less controversial statement.
That's less controversial. Now, Julia Roberts, I think some of her movies have been really good, but to me, like, I'm a little unclear why she's in this movie. Her character does very little. She has almost no agency. And she just, at the end, she's like, oh, well, I guess I'll go back to the thief who I was just chewing out for being a thief because he won. Now he has a bunch of money. Yeah. He's
got $14 million in tax-free money now. Hey, go where the money is. If we're gonna pretend to be the red pill guys, that
wouldn't shock me if what she's doing in her head is that calculus of like, oh, he pulled it off. Oh, okay, I'm gonna go with him now.
Yeah, he's gonna actually like let me use the money. Probably
he's got tons of money.
Just put me up in the hotel. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
She's like, I've seen that movie before. I've been in that movie.
Yeah. No thanks. No thanks. But the other thing, like I said, about a million coincidences, but also, okay, so the power goes out for 30 seconds and then comes back on. Why does everyone freak out? Everyone starts panicking and like looting, like there had been a hurricane or something. And like, anyway, I just thought that was kind of silly. Yeah. So a couple gripes on like the logistics of the movie, but one thing I wanted to get into was the fact that this is a remake. After all, right? And so, 2001 film is a remake of a 1960 movie that, frankly, I had never heard of until pretty recently. And obviously, I've not seen. Have you seen the original Ocean's 11?
I have not.
Okay, all right. Well, we're shooting blind on this one.
I meant to, but then I was like, oh, I'll watch it in the background at work because it's only rated a 6.5 on IMDb. Whereas the remake, the one we're covering, is rated a 7.7. So that's a huge, in ratings world, that's a huge margin. Huge margin.
That's pretty big.
The fact that I didn't know it was a remake until you said, hey, we're going to be doing a remake. And I mistook it for The Italian Job, which I have seen the original of.
I didn't know that was a remake.
And the Mark Wahlberg version is astronomically better than the original. So,
I don't doubt it. Yeah. Oh, that's a really good one. That could have been a contender for this month as well.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And one thing I'm noticing about IMDb, they tend to rate things kind of harsh. Like almost everything on IMDb is rated like a full point lower than I would rate it.
Yeah.
Like people on there are just a little, little gripey in my opinion.
You can't rate Breaking Bad 11, David.
I want to. No, I saw that it was like 8.7 and I was like, why is it not 10.5? Yeah. I don't understand. Even like the best stuff, like universally agreed in other areas to be like the best stuff is like, it's okay.
Unless it's really what ends up happening with this is what I've noticed personally with IMDb is if something stays in that like cult following category or like somewhat unknown, it will have like high ratings. So it would be like 9s, 9.5s. But as soon as it breaks into the larger world, that's when the more people who only know how to rate 10 or 1.
Yeah.
Like that's the problem with the 10-point scale is like almost nothing is less than a 5, right?
Mhm.
Like realistically.
Sure.
But how much
Yeah.
stuff is rated as a 1? It's like, come on.
I hated it. Yeah,
It's like-
exactly.
I didn't watch
I had a
it, but
bad
I'm sure the
experience.
Acolyte is. I did not watch it, but I'm sure the Acolyte is probably a 5. Like I know it's
Right.
like a lot of people hate it. It was a lot of bad plot points, a lot of stuff, but it's still well made. It still has good visuals. It still has a decent, incoherent but decent story. Some good actors. It's probably a 5, but everyone's going to rate it a 1 or a 10.
Well, with there's such a glut of content coming out right now that I think that people are starting to get incredibly critical because we're so used to so much great content. You know, I mean, it's almost like, I mean, this is a weird thing to compare it to, but like cafeteria food. Like when I was in high school, I didn't think cafeteria food was that bad because frankly, it was like, it's food. It's included. I don't care. I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And then once I started, having money and going to restaurants and stuff, I'm like, oh, it's not as good as restaurant food. Okay, but it's not a restaurant. Like, I don't know. I think it's almost the same thing. It's like once you have more options, you start to realize like, oh, wow, I can be really selective about stuff. Yeah. But anyway, speaking of that, and we'll come back to that, but this, just in case you're also unaware that this was a remake, 1960s Rat Pack movie, basically. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., and I'm guessing about 8 other people are in the original one, Ocean's 11.
And Ocean's 11 2,
that's what
which
they call it?
They made a second one called Ocean's 11 2, has Bing Crosby in it. Because I saw that on trivia too, so I was like, they added Bing into the sequel. I was like, wow,
it's like the Expendables of crooners.
Yes,
why not? Just keep it going, right?
Yeah.
Which is essentially like the kind of thing that they did with Oceans, right? Because we got a franchise out of this. So we started with Ocean's 11, and then we got 12, 13, and the one we don't talk about. No, I actually never saw Ocean's 8. And so I don't know if it's good or bad. I'm suspicious that it's not very good. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on 12 and 13. Have you seen them? What did you think?
So I did not like 12 at all. And it could be the fact that they have one of the dumbest plot points in all of heist movie history involving Julia Roberts, that it soured me on the entire movie. I probably should go back and actually rewatch it. It could be an actual good movie minus that.
It's got to be at least a 5, right?
Yeah, it's probably a 5. It may even be a 6. Who knows? And so it just has one incredibly stupid plot point, and it made me hate that movie for probably the last 2 decades because I think it came out probably 20 years ago.
Yeah.
For 13
or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So for 13, I remember liking it, but I also haven't seen it since it was released on the video. So I can't really comment too much, but I remember liking it. They brought back the villains from this one. They brought back the villain from this one. They brought back the villain from 2, and then they added a third villain. And I liked the twist plot of how they actually beat the house in that one. I actually really liked that one. It was more Robin Hood-y than a lot of other things. They try to make these people out to be Robin Hood, where they're actually just thieves.
Yeah.
Whereas 13 is a little bit more like Robin Hood, and I kind of like that. Now, as far as 8, I thoroughly enjoyed 8. Enjoyed 8.
Hot takes.
So 8, by virtue of having a smaller cast, I think was able to actually utilize each cast member better than 11 did.
Huh.
It is not better than 11, but I think it's a good alternative to it. And I think I like the characters. Sandra Bullock plays Danny Ocean's sister, and he is not in the movie for reasons. But it's a fun movie. Definitely worth your time. Finish out the franchise. If they ever make a second one of Ocean's 9 or whatever, Ocean's 8.5.
Are we going to be doing like a Star Wars prequel thing where it's going to be like 11, 12, 13, 8, 9, 10?
Ocean's 2, and it's them
5, 6, 7. Yeah,
Ocean's 2 is them as toddlers, and it's a Home Alone remake.
I want to watch them in the machete order. I think. the cast looked good for Ocean's 8. I thought this looks like a pretty solid cast. I don't see any major issues with this. It looked interesting. I don't know. I tend to be a little skittish on like all whatever remakes of something.
Yes,
in this case, all female remake. I'm like, sounds a little gimmicky. But then again, a lot of people trashed it just for that reason. So it's like, man,
it's like the truth lies somewhere in the middle, probably.
Yeah. Back to the ratings thing, I just really wanted to quickly mention. If we think of it like a grade, right? I'm a professor, so that's where my brain goes. 7.7. So we're dealing with a 77%, which is like, it's okay. But to me, that's a C.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is not a C movie. Not at all. No, this is an A, I think. High A plus. But anyway, that's funny too, because when we were talking about doing this, one of the little it's not behind the scenes, but one of the notable things about this movie is I think this really is what started the trend of Brad Pitt eating in everything that he's in. Just almost every scene in this movie, he's eating, he's chewing gum, maybe drinking coffee, but he's almost always eating. And I don't know if that's just to accentuate his amazing jawline or whatever it is, but it's one of those things.
Hey, getting that craft service bill up. Yeah, that's what it is.
That's the thing. I'm like, hey, it's like, I don't have to, maybe he's just secretly incredibly cheap. They all made more than 14 million for this movie. So,
what's the actor in Arrested Development? Yeah, take that. That's a stew. You're working on a stew,
babe. You got a stew going. Yeah. Carl Weathers. May he rest in peace.
Carl Weathers. Yes.
Oh, hilarious, Carl Weathers. Yes.
Maybe he went to the Carl Weathers acting school.
Oh, that's such a great bit. I love Arrested Development. Anyway, all that being said, we're going to go ahead and crack open the soda and start to pour and sample the more spiritual aspects of this film and its narrative. So we're going to shift gears and see what's in the vault, if you will, for Ocean's 11. So Eric, what was one of the themes that stood out to you?
All right, so I'm going to start with so the theme that I really actually kind of took me by surprise. I was like, oh, I don't think the film realized what they were doing at the end of the day. And so I'll start with the quote is because the house always wins. Play long enough, you never change the stakes. The house takes you. Unless when that perfect hand comes along, you bet big and then you take the house. And so it's one of the things I love heist films because it takes the audience for a ride too. You think you're in on everything, then a couple of minutes later, when you what you thought was going on actually gets pulled out from under you. And this got me thinking. So I actually asked my wife once, like we watched it. I've seen this movie I don't know how many times, and it's actually the first time she ever saw it. And I said, "So what exactly was this film about?" Because think about it, it's like, what's this film about? Like, what's the motivation of the characters? And she said, like. She was like, revenge? But then I was like, but revenge for what? Like, think about it. I was like, revenge for what? And then I thought, and I think the answer lies in Proverbs 6:27-35. It says, can a man carry fire next to his chest and his clothes not be burned? Or can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be scorched? So is he who goes into his neighbor's wife. None who touch her will go unpunished. People do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy his appetite when he is hungry. But if he is caught, he will pay sevenfold. He will give all the goods of his house. He who commits adultery lacks sense. He who does it destroys himself. He will get wounds and dishonor, and his disgrace will not be wiped away. For jealousy makes a man furious, and he will not spare when he takes revenge. He will accept no compensation. He will refuse though you multiply gifts. So what this film does, the film is about a husband winning back his bride and exposing who the true thief was. So Danny is actually not the thief in this movie that Proverbs is talking about. It's Benedict. Benedict's the thief. He stole Danny's wife, and now he must pay the price for it. And it's this cool thing as you think about it, it's like, this is exactly how like God holds the marriage covenant in such high regard that he uses that as the example of what he's done with Christ and the church. And any man that tries to get with his bride, even while she's straying, because that's a part of the plot point. Well, she's straying. She's with Benedict. It's like, whoa, no. Just because she doesn't want to be married and sign the legal paperwork, that doesn't mean it actually is, like, in the eyes of God, that doesn't mean it actually got dissolved. God didn't sign the divorce papers. Okay. So even while she's straying, Benedict's still the one acting as the thief. And that same thing was like with Abraham and Isaac, his son, when they lie about their wives, oh, there's really my sister. God chastises the kings who were trying to get in the way of that marriage covenant and go, no. And that in that mercy, God didn't allow those kings to become thieves by laying with his with Abraham and Isaac's wife. But it is the thing where it's like, God will receive just payment for thievery. And so at the end of the day, is what Benedict lost, the $160 million that he lost, is actually just a small price, like to pay. It was like he should have. The proverb says he'll accept he would repay back all the goods in his house. So technically, that was only like half of his wealth that actually was taken away from him. He didn't even have to give up his whole house for it. And the other thing is, he wasn't willing. If Benedict truly was the good guy, if he was just the guy who was there, he was taking care of Danny's wife because Danny had been a terrible husband, then he would have given her up. He wouldn't have given her up for exchange for money, because Proverbs also says in 31:10, an excellent wife who can find. She is far more precious than jewels. Yeah, it was like, she's far more precious than any jewels, more than diamonds, more than anything. This is the posture that Christians should have when we look at these things. We've drifted so far in our culture of just going with the cultural thing. It's like, she left him, he left her, he emotionally abandoned her, he went to jail, that's abandonment, annul the marriage and be done with it. And it's like, no, Danny, in a real sense, he did the right thing. He was like, no, you're trying to steal my wife, man. It's like, how he did it is not how we would condone in the Christian sense.
There's a reject in there for sure.
There's definitely a reject in there for sure of how he was doing it. But as far as an analogy of no, it was still his wife. It's still his wife at the end of the day, and he's going. And Benedict is the one that was trying to steal it. And that's one thing I love about the heist movies. Like I said, is they always turn it. There's that quick turn at the end where you think how they're going to accomplish it, and then it changes, and you go, oh, I thought I was watching a movie about a con artist. Getting revenge. But then you think again, what revenge? Benedict hasn't done anything to Danny. And you go, wait, he did. He stole Danny's wife. He didn't know he stole Danny's wife, but he did. Yeah. But at the end of the day, he did the same way that the Pharaoh and the other king in Genesis with Abraham and Sarah. They didn't know they were stealing Abraham's wife, but God did, and God stopped them from it.
And they acted virtuously instead of
acted virtuously. Whereas Benedict, the second how it used to be previous culture, is when he found out that this was a divorced woman or a still married woman. If you were a virtuous man, you went, no, you were the Boaz. That went, no, I need to set this right before I move forward with this. And so when Benedict meets Danny, he has the opportunity to be like, well, hey, here's your wife. Instead, he was like, no, she's mine now. She's my property now. And he won't give her up. He's willing to give her up for mere money at the end of the day. He's not willing to be that Boaz.
And so I was initially prepared to give you some pushback on this, and I will on the Benedict side in a moment. But in terms of the divorce side, I think what you're saying is that because this doesn't satisfy even the biblical requirements for divorce, because infidelity and, you know, that's that sort of requirement, which, to say nothing of remarriage, right? Because that's a whole separate thing. There's divorce, and then there's divorce leading to remarriage. Anyway, but because it didn't satisfy that, he was stealing his wife. I think I can get behind that. I will push back on the idea that he's a bad guy, though, because as I was watching it this time, I was trying to get my head around, why is Benedict a bad guy again? And I think Benedict's a bad guy because we're told he's a bad guy.
Yes.
Right? Like, I'm starting to be like, hashtag Benedict did nothing wrong a little bit, because I'm like, okay, so he's a business owner. It's not his personal money in the vault. It's not like they stole his wealth.
Yeah.
That's the wealth that supplies the, you know, that pays all of the employees for this business, and, you know, whatever. But, there was no, like, you know, this whole idea of save the cat. Right.
Yeah.
And so basically, if you want to show that a character is good or virtuous, have them do something to a helpless animal or person to help a little old lady cross the road or something. There's kind of a similar principle, and I don't know if it has a name or what, but if you want to show a character as a bad guy, there's usually a quick scene of them like interrogating someone in a back room, doing something especially cruel. We get that in Ocean's 13. In Ocean's 13, we know why Al Pacino is a bad dude.
Yes.
One, he's Al Pacino. Two, they show him actually being cruel to people. Benedict seems like an okay guy. That being said, I'm becoming a lot more critical of gambling over the last couple years, and becoming a little bit more like, well, maybe they are ill-gotten gains because the house does always win. But regardless, I'm like, it doesn't show him doing anything terrible.
And that's, I honestly had the same thing, because that's what I was, when my wife said revenge, I was like, but for what?
Yeah.
But for what? He hasn't done anything. And then that's when that verse, literally this verse popped in my head at that exact moment was, oh, that's what he's getting revenge for. He's sleeping with his wife. That's
so once Tess walks down the road, I need a reason. I need a reason.
Yes. And that's what it was. Yeah. That's what it was. I was like, okay, now I got it. Now, is Benedict a quote unquote bad guy? No, but he is sleeping with someone else's wife.
Yeah. And even if they were to try and go the route of like, oh, he's rich, so he's bad.
Yeah.
Well, we're not actually even shown what his wealth is in this movie. You know, not to be a Benedict apologist here, but like, we see him walk into his place of work where there's a lot of money. It's like going after a banker because they have a lot of money. It's like, no, that's not their money.
Yeah.
So anyway, but with 13, I think it just did. I thought I liked 13 more. I guess I never got to my casual points on that, but I liked 13 as much, if not more, than Ocean's 11. I thought 13 was stupendous. And I think part of the reason why is because we actually understand why he's such a bad guy.
Yeah.
Why Al Pacino's character
isn't even in 13. Refresh my memory on this. Benedict comes back around and he's one of the quote unquote good guys. He's
against the 13th. Yeah.
He's against Pacino. At the end of the day, he tries to pull his own heist and it doesn't fall. Yeah. It doesn't work out at the end, but it still is one of those things where he wasn't such a bad guy that they didn't plan on team up with him at the end, you know?
I mean, essentially, yeah.
The devil, I guess, type of thing. Yeah.
I think so. And from what I remember, it was a matter of like, look, we're out of money. Let's go ask him for money. And he says, okay. And then he tries to steal from them and he fails at stealing from them. And, you know, it was a whole thing. I mean, there were some self-serving, convoluted parts of Ocean's 13, no question. I just thought that the heist aspect really got back to what 11 was going for. But anyway, all that to say, I think you make some really good points there, because I mean, I had a similar kind of observation, right? You know, this whole idea of saving his bride. And again, we'll set aside the fact that we don't think that Tess's character makes decisions that make any sense in this.
Yeah. It's like, we're talking very much an analogy here. There's a reason why the themes are diluted.
Exactly. Yeah. And we're reaching, admittedly, like me and Richard used to say, we're reaching with this.
We're doing a lot of juking right here.
Yeah.
just a lot of Jesus jukets.
Oh yeah. And prepare for the number one juke, I think, of the episode, which is that, you know, I'm reminded of another leader who had a crew of about a dozen men who beat extreme circumstances to bankrupt an evil empire and free his bride. Right? I mean, you know, maybe Ocean's 12 is the one then that's really the
Beautifully framed, David, because honestly, this was the plot point I thought of, and I was like, no, this is too much juking. This is too much of a Jesus juke right here. I've got to come up with something else.
It's very like, okay, so now we're comparing, this is the risk we run doing what we do, right?
Yeah.
If we're always trying to find a Christ figure, then we get into some really difficult situations, because now we're like, I guess Danny's the Christ figure, the thief. Or another one of my favorites is, Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
I guess that, Forrest Gump is the Christ figure, but that doesn't feel right either.
Yeah.
So, in any case, there is something about this, though. I mean, so juking aside, there's something about a heist that is so satisfying, right? And I think that maybe part of this comes back to the underlying stories that we are attracted to as creatures, right? In the case of a heist, there's a clear enemy, and usually it's clearer than in this movie why they're the enemy. But there's a task that is straightforward, even if it's complex. There's a challenge that draws a diverse crew together that maybe wouldn't normally work together under a common goal to deceive the enemy, take back what he has gained through deceit. Everyone knows their job. There is a just reward for their efforts, because typically they're stealing money that was, you're trying to kidnap what I've rightfully stolen, if you will. And so, there's an effort there to make things right in a vigilante sort of sense. And so while we could easily nitpick some of the aspects of that similarity, I'd rather stick to the heist aspect, because in a sense, what Jesus did in the crucifixion and the resurrection and the entire plan of redemption, in a sense, what Jesus did was pull off a heist, right? I mean, so, this whole idea of, being able to foretell and foresee from the Old Testament, from the prophets, what Jesus was going to do when he gave his life and saved the people. Evidently, that was lost on many of the leaders of the world and lost on the enemy himself. And so in 1 Corinthians 2, verses 7 and 8, it says, but we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, even the hidden wisdom, which God ordained before the world unto our glory. And then verse 8, which none of the princes of this world knew, for had they known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. And so the princes of this world, I assume in large part means Pontius Pilate, Herod, etc. But I think that I've at least heard people say that this also applies to Satan. If Satan knew what was going to happen, then he wouldn't have crucified him. That makes sense to me. Makes me wonder, did Satan not read the Bible? But in any case, there is an aspect of this where there's deceit, and there's even, getting something of great worth, right? And he's winning back his bride, and he's winning, and he's building his kingdom. He even uses a diverse crew to expand his kingdom today, which of course makes me think of the body of Christ, which I know we've talked about this a number of times on this podcast, but for those who haven't joined us for those, the members of the church are referred to as the body of Christ, not just as a body or group of people, but as a group of people with differences that are united under a common goal. And so 1 Corinthians 12 has a lot to say about this, verses 12 through 27. I'm not going to read all of them. I'm just going to pick out a couple of key points from it. But verse 12, for just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. Verse 13 speaks about that body, including Jews, Greeks, slaves, and free, those who are made to drink of one spirit. So major differences within these groups culturally and in terms of priorities that are made to drink of the shared spirit. Verse 17 points out that if the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? You've got parts of the body complaining, well, if I'm not the hand, then I don't belong to the body. But in verse 18, it says, God arranged the members of the body. He called them together. He put the team together, and each one of them as he chose. In verse 19, it says, if all were a single member, where would the body be? Right. And so, if we go back to this idea of Ocean's 11, if everyone on the crew had the same job, that wouldn't really work. Right. If everyone on the crew was the grease man who could, do flips around, or if everybody was, the decision maker, the leader, it doesn't work. If everyone was just the getaway driver, it wouldn't work. And then, verse 21, the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And on those that we think are less honorable, we bestow the greater honor. And so there's more that's said about this, but I just wanted to wrap up. Verse 26, I think, is a pretty good illustration of what this movie shows. If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. Right. Yeah. And so this was an all or nothing heist that they were going to pull off. Either they were going to make millions or they were going to lose millions and go to jail for a very long time.
Yeah.
Or get killed. So the stakes are very high. But additionally, that just reminds me of the line, where they tell Danny, you're out, because he's put everyone at risk. Right. If one member suffers, all suffer together. But it also made me think of the brothers. Right. So Scott Conn and
Casey Affleck.
Casey Affleck. I was like, something Affleck. And so I don't know if they're ever named in the movie, but apparently their names are Virgil and Turk Malloy. But in the movie, I think they just call them the Mormon twins, right? Yeah. The Mormon boys from Utah. They have like all of the kind of like undesirable jobs, right? I mean, they run stuff around here to there. They're driving stuff, they kind of have the lower skill jobs, but they're really indispensable. Like if either of them dropped the ball, the whole thing would have fallen apart. So arguably they did a lot of the heavy lifting, but it just reminds me of the body of Christ. Like, you could almost think of them as, if we think of people like Sunday school teachers or, children's ministry workers or people in the church, that, shovel the walk, mow the lawn, clean the toilets, those types of jobs. They might not seem indispensable, but really in the context of both the corporate church, but also the body of Christ as a whole, not just a building, not just a meeting place or a meeting time. These are pretty indispensable roles. And so I don't know, heist movies, I think, just really point out how those different skills work together. But I don't know. What do you think?
I think so, that the heist, everyone wants to be part of a team, right?
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be part of a team. Everyone wants to have very, very dirty comedian Dane Cook. He had a very good skit about a heist. Like every heist movie has this person and has that person and has this formula. The person gets shot in the back of the leg and
we gotta go. We gotta go.
Get to the van. Where's the van? Where's the van?
I'm in. I need 30 seconds. Yeah.
All of us want to be part of a team. And it's one of the cool things. I read a book recently from Carl Trueman about critical theory and, how it came about, how it has its roots in Marxism and then the Frankfurt School and all of that. And he did a really good historical analysis, but he said the number one way to disprove Marxism, critical theory, is not via argument, because they actually don't accept arguments because it's part of their philosophy. They literally don't accept arguments. It's a very, very interesting thing. He said the only way to defeat it is in the bodily church, is the church coming together and living out all of the contradictions in life. Like that you can be a husband and a father and a son and and all of these things simultaneously and be a sinner. And it's like it's only in there. It's the church is the only place where you're able to have all of your identities and be in unity with people who have all of their own identities, and it not be a contradiction and actually be something glorious. So yeah, it's all of us want to be part of a team, and the church is the best place to become part of a true and eternal team, because each individual church has its members and it has its head and it has its hands and it has its left pinky toe, which I generally am. I'm generally the left pinky toe. Is
you get stubbed a lot? Is that the deal?
Yeah. It was the littlest thing. If I get stubbed, the rest of the body knows it. Yeah, no. I'm the early warning system. But
awesome.
Is every congregation has that, but then it steps up to the next level, and then every region of all these hundreds of churches, they all have that. This church that has these strong people, now they're the left pinky toe, but they're all still valuable. It's only when we start to go, hey, we could probably get rid of the toes. We can probably get rid of this. We can probably get rid of that. It's like, do I really need my appendix? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. but hey, let's go ahead and cut ourselves open anyways and remove it. And it's like, well, maybe it was there for a reason. And maybe cutting yourself open to remove something is not always a healthy thing. And so when we're talking about a body, a physical body, we all start, looking at ourselves instead of envying each other. The left hand shouldn't envy the right hand. Is just be what you are, and you're going to do your job a lot better. The right hand would look your hands would be like this, very, very opposite. And
couldn't grab anything.
You couldn't grab anything. If everything was a right hand or everything was a left hand or they were swapped, it wouldn't work out.
If you got 2 left feet, you can't dance, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's a good point. I mean, and it's easy to think like, maybe the most obvious way to think of this is the people wanting the positions of greater honor or greater authority, wanting to be the leaders. And certainly that's probably the greater temptation. But I do wonder as well for people that are in authority, if they ever wonder like, man, I sure wish I was the foot, like, because authority comes with, responsibility, and that is a pain to deal with. And so people that are in leadership, I imagine, sometimes they're maybe thinking like, well, maybe if I were the foot or if I were the toe or whatever, this wouldn't be such a hassle. And once again, back to the whole idea of remakes and comedies, Freaky Friday, right? Everyone thinks that, if only I wish I could switch places with you for just one day. That whole kind of thing where it's easy in that world to show, oh, wow, their life actually is hard. And you come to appreciate them more once you switch lives with them. Well, I mean, that's a biblical concept too, right? Walking a mile in someone else's shoes, which actually I don't think that's in the Bible, but anyway, carrying each other's burdens is the empathy, the underlying principles there, even if that was a Aesop's fable instead or something. Like I said, hopefully not too much blasphemy, but excellent. So I think there's certainly more we can discuss, and that's why we're going to enter the lightning round. Yes, before we wrap up the episode, we're going to sift for any themes in a little round of receive, reject, and redeem, seeing if there are any themes that this movie illustrates that we can take from a biblical worldview as they are, any that we need to reject outright, or if there are any that we can kind of redeem and finagle a bit into a proper understanding. So, Eric, what are some things about this movie that we can reject?
Number one, right off the bat, is being a thief or con artist. This movie does. So it's like, this is kind of one of those interesting things where sometimes we go, oh, we'll reject this because the film didn't. It kind of said it was bad, but just in case you didn't catch it, it was bad. This film actually, I will say, pretty much does romanticize the thief. Like 100%. It doesn't say what Danny's doing is wrong. Anything. Like it provides no commentary on all these people being thieves and con artists. And I think a lot of this derives from our American misunderstanding of the legends of like Robin Hood. Is Robin Hood properly understood? He was serving the true king. He wasn't just he wasn't just thieving from the general wealthy. The whole thing of he robs from the rich and gives to the poor is he robs from the unjust tax collector and gives it back to those whom it was stolen from.
So you're saying Robin Hood
doesn't quite rhyme, but
right.
Robin Hood was a servant of the true king fighting against the injustice of the pretender king and the sheriff of Nottingham. He was not an ANCAP robbing from just the general wealthy. The people, the quote unquote wealthy he was robbing from were the nobles of the day. And so this is before capitalism existed. And so the nobles were those who were receiving their livelihood off the burden of taxes. So really he was a libertarian.
I was going to say, so you're telling me that Robin Hood wasn't a symbol of socialism and Marxist rebellion, that he was actually a my blood runneth yellow libertarian? that also was somehow a monarchist.
I was about to say he was more just a straight up monarchist, but he was just fighting against the corrupt totalitarians.
Fantastic. Okay, so a little more like William Wallace ish, right? Standing up to corrupt nobles. Okay, I can see that. So you can almost. I mean, maybe we should do a Robin Hood episode because
the cartoon one, I'd love it. Yeah,
I was thinking Men in Tights,
Robin Hood,
but,
Men in Tights, Men in Tights. Yes,
because I heard you have a little Freudian slip and say Rottingham there. Because to this day, I'm like Rottingham, Nottingham. Which one did Mel Brooks come up with? Rabbi Tuchman. Fantastic movie. Okay, so yeah, agreed. That's an excellent reject, which is being a thief, right? It's certainly the most obvious one. And, and even if we were to go the Ocean's 13 route, which is a little bit more like modern Robin Hood in terms of the actual outcome of the heist, it's still worth rejecting the way that worked as well. And anything else come to mind?
Yeah. So one of the other ones is assuming that your charisma is enough to maintain your marriage. Because that's really one of the things that Danny didn't get, and this is why it's Tess going back to him at the end of the film doesn't make any actual logical sense. It doesn't flow with it at all. Anyways, but it's highlighted in this one scene where he asks her, he goes, does he make you laugh? And she goes, he doesn't make me cry. And that's one of the most heartbreaking type of things is he just thought, he's like, hey, I always made you laugh. Like, we always had a good time, right? And she was like, yeah, but the other side of it, I was crying all the time because you went to jail for being a con artist.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, and yeah, that was actually my reject point too, which is don't run back to your toxic relationship with a con man simply because he bested your successful jerk of a boyfriend. That it made no sense to me. I mean, and I don't have a verse for that one. I don't know that I need one for that. It seems like pretty sound advice. But yeah, I agree. That didn't make the most sense. But yeah, back to your original one. Stealing is a sin. And in fact, to refer to someone as a thief, which they do multiple times in this movie, playfully and jokingly and in a lighthearted way, the word thief in the Bible, one of the main places that it's used is John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and to destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. So I don't know. I mean, would there be a way for someone like Benedict to be brought to justice without having to violate the law, without having to, to go that route? Yeah, I'm sure that there would have been, but that wouldn't have been nearly as fun of a movie. So
it'd be a legal procedural movie instead.
Yeah. It'd
be 12 Angry Men.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be Aaron Brockovich, a different Julia Roberts movie. So yeah, as far as rejects, some of those are fairly obvious. But what about ideas that we can either receive outright or some that we can redeem?
So I would say that the receive is, which was your main point, which is one of your main points. Essentially, was using everyone's gifts, like know your team well enough to know what everyone's gifts are, and so you can put them in the positions that they need to be. Like the two brothers, they worked well together. They bickered, and so use the bickering, the brotherly bickering, to your advantage. Have them stage a fight in the middle of the casino and block the camera. Have them start yelling at each other in an uncomfortable way in front of the other people. Use everyone's gifts to progress the mission, mission forward.
Absolutely, that's a good one. Yeah, and I think in terms of receive, I actually have one of my big ones. I thought could be essentially just received the way it was, which is, you lose focus in this game for 1 second and somebody gets hurt. That was one of the quotes from this movie where he says that to Linus, Matt Damon's character, a couple of times. And in both cases, it was Yen who got hurt. Poor guy. But, if you lose focus, somebody gets hurt. I took away from that our sin affects other people, right? And that's a very biblical concept, that our sins don't only affect us. We tend to think of it as just a matter of whatever I'm doing, that's between me and God. It's like, well, it's really not, because you're part of a community, you're part of a body. And so if a body part gets injured, then the rest of the body is going to suffer as a result of that, and is going to have to accommodate and perhaps be infected and be harmed as a result of that injury. And so Tess points this out. She pointed out that the victims that he robbed from, she's like, they had insurance, they got reimbursed that way, but she didn't have anything to make her whole. That's how she put it, to be made whole. And so, we have a lot of unsuspecting victims in our sinful decisions that we really have to consider. And sometimes we don't even recognize all of the ways that our decisions affect other people. But we as Christians are called to take that into account in a way that the world often does not. So, yeah, I really thought that was a pretty good theme that admittedly we had to dig for a little bit, but it was in there. So any other redeem points before we wrap up?
So the last I have is just one little redeem. And it is fight for your wife. Absolutely fight for your wife, but in the context of the moral and legal law. It's like, do everything you can. Like, if you're able to win her back, do it legally, do it morally, and do it God's way.
Boom. Excellent. So really, Ocean's 11 is a marriage story. It's
absolutely. It is a romance. That's why the girl falls head over heels for the bad guy at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. That's why that had to happen. So excellent. Well, this has been a fun episode. So thank you, Eric, for taking the time to pull this heist with me. This is a lot of fun. So, and thank you, listeners, for joining us for Popcorn Theology. This has been a great episode. The credits are about to roll, but before we go, we just want to remind you, do all the stuff that you hear about, like, share, rate and review. If you want some free stickers, check out the show notes for the details on that. And keep the discussion going. Tell us why we're wrong about Julia Roberts or about Robin Hood. Get into an argument about socialism in the chat, please.
Boost the algorithm.
Exactly. Yeah. Do all of that stuff. And wherever it is that you're talking about movies, keep engaging media from a godly worldview. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer. Thanks for watching this episode of Popcorn Theology. For more content, subscribe on YouTube. Follow and interact on social media to help broaden the conversation. Check out our archive of past episodes at popcorntheology.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, and consider becoming a patron saint by supporting us on Patreon, which lets you interact, influence, and enjoy exclusive bonus content.